Hi, friends. So I was having a conversation with someone recently who was asking me about my time in Côte d'Ivoire, also known as Ivory Coast. So for those of you who don't know me, I spent a year of my life living and working in Côte d'Ivoire, and I learned a lot about the economy during the time that I lived there. So this person I was talking to recently asked me what I thought were the main challenges for Côte d'Ivoire's development. Of course, this is a middle income country or a lower middle income country. So it's in sub-Saharan Africa, and a million things need to be done to really help this amazing country climb the income ladder and develop itself to increase in wealth. So it was hard to answer that person in the moment, but I have some pretty clear thoughts on this that I want to share with you today. So the first thing you need to know about Côte d'Ivoire is that it's a bit of a regional powerhouse in West Africa. It's not as big as Nigeria, but it isn't beset by quite as many problems as Nigeria is, and really a transportation and energy hub throughout the whole region, and exports electricity to the whole region, and its port in Abidjan is used by a lot of countries to ship their goods onto the open ocean and international markets. And it's quite a diverse economy. It has a lot going for it in terms of natural resources. The main thing that it's known for is cocoa. It produces 40% of the world's cocoa, and the second largest producer in the world is its neighbor, Ghana. And uh, Cote d'Ivoire also produces a lot of cotton. It's the world's largest cashew producer. And there's quite a bit of gold and also oil and gas in the country. So this is a country that has a lot going for it. And during the French colonial period, a lot of investments have been made to industrialize the country. So when it gained independence in 1960, the country had quite a lot going for it, and has continued to build on those economic strengths in the decades since. So but what I said to this person I was speaking to about Cote d'Ivoire needing to develop, uh, I was focused on the idea of capturing more value add in the country. So if you think across some of the main sectors that I just mentioned, cocoa, cotton, oil and gas, gold, cashew, how do you avoid falling into the trap that so many uh, developing countries and sub-Saharan African countries fall into, which is just exporting the raw commodity onto international markets? Sure, there's a place for that, and Cote d'Ivoire and many other countries will continue to do this. But the idea is to capture more of that value in the domestic economy. And what I mean by that is to try to process more locally. So there's been some real progress capturing increased value add in the cocoa industry. So you even have a French chocolate maker that created the first chocolate factory in the country back in 2015, 2016. So that's a big step and quite astonishing. In fact, if you think about it, the world's largest cocoa producer uh, didn't produce any of its own chocolate until uh, starting from 10 years ago. But the real big business in the cocoa industry is in the intermediate products. So there's different types of butter, powder, paste that you can process cocoa into, and this is where most of the action is happening. So first of all, the government has a target of processing 50% of national production locally by, well, this year. I don't know if that's been achieved, but there has been a lot of progress, it seems. So uh, the large private trading houses, Cargill, Barry Callebaut, Olam, and some others, are really the ones that dominate what is called first stage grinding. But the government has built a national champion called Transcow alongside them, not to replace them or make them stop their processing activities, but to complement them and compete with them. So It's estimated that each ton of cocoa that is processed locally adds roughly $900 to $1,200 per ton compared to raw export. So you're really capturing much more value in the domestic economy before shipping cocoa overseas in its raw form. So moving on, cotton is pretty much the counterexample to cocoa. Cotton is where not enough has happened. So the idea is to process cotton into textiles and develop a bit of a domestic textile industry. So the government has a target to raise the cotton processing rate to 70% by last year, but that definitely has not been met. It was 27% of raw cotton that was processed in country before being exported. Um, and well, actually, I don't think that target is related to exports, but only 27% was processed in 2020, and definitely 70% hasn't been achieved yet. Uh, the vast majority of cotton is exported from Côte d'Ivoire in its raw form. Some estimate up to 95%. So that's mostly to Asian spinners, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Vietnam, which have very dominant global textile industries. So the domestic textile chain only has four legacy players, one of whom is called Uniwax, and I'll get to them in just a moment. And the reason that there are only four domestic players is that the sector was hit really hard by counterfeit Chinese wax print imports in the 2000s. So about 80% of firms in the sector closed at the time, 20, 25 years ago, and about 10,000 jobs were lost. I should say that also coincided with uh, a lot of instability and the country's civil war during the 2000s. So in February 2026, Uniwax, one of those four legacy players, was bought by a domestic cotton company. And this is explicitly framed as a vertical integration because the domestic cotton company, COIC, that bought them, harvests cotton in its raw form, but didn't have any or very limited processing capacity. So it bought Uniwax as a vertical integration, and since then, Uniwax's revenue and share price on the domestic or regional stock market have risen really sharply. So that's promising, but still a lot to do in the cotton sector. Uh, Oil and gas, refining capacity is expanding, but from a narrow base. So the government target is to increase refining capacity by about 2.5 times uh, of the current level by 2030 via building a new refinery. So there's one refinery in the country, and let's not forget, many sub-Saharan African countries do not even have a single refinery. And this refinery, the SIR, was built in 1962, and it is a hydrocracker. So it's one of the only hydrocrackers in Africa, which means it can convert really dirty crude oil into good refined fuels for domestic use. There's a 2 billion euro modernization program that's underway to help the SIR meet higher fuel standards. But to increase the capacity, that's really going to be driven by the second refinery that should be coming online in the next few years, hopefully. I'm not sure on the detailed plans for that, or even the location hasn't quite been determined yet, so it could be several years before it's built. But the idea here for more refining isn't necessarily export value add, it's more about import substitution. Because when the local refinery isn't at full capacity, the country has to rely on imported refined fuels from Nigeria primarily. So the idea is to substitute those imports with locally refined fuels, which also helps the country stay in external balance and you're not relying so much on imported fuel. And it's also a topic that relates back to energy security. Gold So essentially all gold from the country is exported raw, but a refinery is being planned. So production has tripled in the past 10 years from around 23.5 tons in 2015 to about 62 tons. Uh, it's projected for 2026. This is across 8 major mines. Of course, there's a new gold mine that's been found, so that should be coming into production next year. I forgot to mention earlier when talking about oil that there have been some oil field discoveries in recent years in Côte d'Ivoire, so domestic crude production is increasing as well. Back to gold. So virtually all gold is exported raw, as I was saying, but the Mines Ministry has announced plans for a national gold refinery, and this is explicitly aimed at developing a bit of a domestic jewelry industry. So again, uh, projects are in the pipeline to capture a little bit of value from this raw natural resource. And lastly, I'll end on a positive note, talking about cashew. This is actually the strongest value add success story in Côte d'Ivoire, I'd say. So, Côte d'Ivoire is the world's largest raw producer of cashews at 1.2 to 1.5 million tons per year. The government's target is to process 50% of the harvest locally by 2030. Um, Local processing capacity has increased by 5 to 10x since 2015, but it's not clear that the 50% local harvest target is going to be met by 2030. That remains to be seen. But what's really encouraging is that last year in 2025, Cote d'Ivoire became the world's second largest cashew kernel exporter, behind only Vietnam. And this is from a country that used to just ship raw nuts to Asia for processing. So a lot has happened in the past 10 plus years. Um, Last things to say about cashew. So there are 3 new agro-industrial zones planned in the country's north. If they're not already online, they should be coming online quite soon. Uh, the idea is to create 12,000 additional direct jobs uh, in 2026. And 18,000 jobs have already been created, and two-thirds of those have been for women. So a real gender success story there as well, which is crucial for Côte d'Ivoire to achieve its development goals and increasing income per capita. So there's also a policy tool in the cashew industry called an exclusive procurement window each January to March, which gives local processors first access to raw nuts before exporters can buy. So this is another way in which you can subsidize or somehow favor local processing over raw exports, and the government is clearly implementing that. So when I was talking to this person a few weeks ago about development in Cote d'Ivoire, these are the ideas that I really had in mind. I didn't have all those details at hand when I was talking to that person and discussing Cote d'Ivoire's development goals with them, but I thought I'd share some of these details with you because I think it's really one of the most interesting angles of development, not only for Cote d'Ivoire, but as a model for a lot of resource-rich countries to follow. All right. Thanks, guys. Catch you in the next one. Bye.